Today we're going to be looking at the different types of organisms and how we classify them. The main way we classify organisms is how they obtain and use energy. There are some organisms like plants who can make glucose or energy from the sunlight. There are others like humans and molds who have to consume glucose and cannot make it on their own in order to function. Let's look about how we specifically define these organisms. Types of organisms. There are several types of living organisms on the planet. We can classify what type of organism it is by how it gets its glucose. Organisms come in all shapes and sizes, and how they obtain and get their energy is crucial to classification. Some organisms make their glucose, while others must consume it. Some organisms, like plants, are able to produce their own glucose from the power of the sun. Others, like animals and detritivores, must eat other organisms and steal their glucose and use it for themselves. Types of organisms. Heterotrophs. A heterotroph is an organism that cannot make its own glucose. Instead, it must consume and create its own. Animals are a key example of this, as well as molds and funguses break into two key groups of heterotrophs. These organisms must get their glucose from other sources, eating other organisms or breaking them down. Animals are examples of heterotrophs that must consume other organisms, whereas molds and funguses are an example of breaking other organisms down. Consumers eat other organisms for glucose. Example, cats, humans, dogs, jellyfish, etc. Consumers are organisms that have to eat other organisms for their glucose. They actively chew, swallow, and digest their food and then place the glucose into their stream. However, they cannot make their own glucose. Detritivores break down organic matter into glucose. Example, molds and mushrooms. Notice here, instead of eating, molds and funguses break down matter into parts and steal the glucose and absorb it that way. This is different from other organisms where they have to actively consume. This is more of an absorption. Autotrophs use the sun or other non-living source for energy. All energy on the planet comes from the sun. However, the medium between the sun's energy and glucose is plants. Plants take the sun's energy and turn it into usable glucose for organisms. Producers use photosynthesis to take the sun's energy and store it as glucose. Example, plants and seaweed. Seaweed and other plants take the sun's energy, capture it, and transform CO2 into usable glucose, which is then used for their plant's energy. Photosynthesis, the process where sunlight is transformed in the chloroplast to make glucose sugar. In photosynthesis, carbon dioxide and light energy are turned into glucose and oxygen for the plant. This energy then is used to support the plant's structure and growth. Since a plant does not actively need to hunt its glucose, instead it is considered an autotroph producer. Sponges do not do photosynthesis.